But if you compare your intention against your customer experience, we're finding that it's correct about 40% of the time, which is pretty tremendously low. And if we look at variations, it's even worse. Variation intention or correctness there is usually about 25% across what brands expected to deploy for clients, which these are pretty low numbers. Content on the page is what drives conversion. And these conversations are always kind of a little bit challenging. You have some folks that are experts, and you're like, hey, Justin, this is like pretty rudimentary, I know this, let's move it along. And other folks that are like, what is a variation? So I'm going to try to split the middle ground and then use any feedback to redirect the conversation as we go along. Maybe most importantly, for the long-term impact of your product is if you're showing the wrong images, you have the wrong bullets, you're making the wrong claim, you're going to get negative reviews because customers say that isn't what I bought. And those negative reviews follow you really forever. You have to grind all of those issues until you have content that can be deployed to Amazon. And then once you get it to a plus 90% correctness, it's pretty easy to maintain and easy to change over time.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Intentwise Connect podcast. We're going to talk about content on Amazon. Whether you're a brand or an agency, I think there's a lot of investment and mind share that goes into content development. But I think the context of today's conversation is the fact that sometimes that's broken, sometimes it's hard to detect, sometimes even after you detect, it's hard to fix. I think it's an important enough topic that, we want to have someone who spends all day thinking about this and building processes and tools to address this. So I'm joined by Justin Lay, a friend of mine from the industry, but also someone that's really hyper-focused on this problem. Justin, how are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me today, Srina.
So Justin is not new to our space. He ran an agency for several years. He's the co-founder of Workflow Labs, where they are focused on building, again, automation of solutions to this problem. What I get excited about these kinds of webinars is like at Intentwise, I don't spend a ton of time thinking about content optimization, not because I don't want to, but that's not our strike zone. We are more on the advertising and analytics side of Amazon ecosystem. So occasionally we want to bring in complementary partners that can educate us on something that we don't think too much about. So I'm excited about this from that context as well. Quick note on logistics. Feel free to drop in your questions. I think as they roll in, depending on the question, I'm going to have Justin respond to that either during the presentation or we'll have some time at the end as well. We will share out the recording also once the webinar is done. I think that's it. Justin, over to you, and let's get this going.
All right, sounds great. Well, thanks again for having me on today. Longtime fan of what you have been building over at Intentwise. You guys have always been on the forefront of everything, and it's a real honor to be considered a company that you guys are interested in hearing from. So just a little bit of my background around maybe why you should be interested in what we're doing at Workflow Labs, just to give a little context, and then we'll jump right into it. And I want to maybe give a kind of call out to, there's lots of things you can do on Amazon that cost you lots of money. The things we're going to talk about today don't cost you anything. They're maybe the most impactful things you can do on Amazon, and they're free. So maybe that tagline alone will pique some interest and keep you engaged as we talk about some of the basics of doing business on Amazon. As Srinath mentioned, I run a company called Workflow Labs. We've been around since 2022. This is not a pitch for Workflow Labs, but what we do here is we focus on the catalog and operations side of doing business with Amazon. All the nuts and bolts of setting up items, fixing content, unsuppressed ASINs. If it involves a ticket or navigating Amazon's incredibly complex and constantly changing and unsupported UI, it's something that our company does, and we do it with software supported by experts. Prior to this, I ran an agency called IdealClick for about 14 years, where we managed Amazon businesses for about 500 brands. And then a long time ago, I worked at Amazon back in the 2005 to 2008 area, until I was at this meeting where someone said, what would Jeff do? And I said, he would probably quit and start a company. So that's the long background as to how we got here and why it matters. And the interesting thing is the main problems of doing business on Amazon today are basically exactly the same as they were 30 years ago in 1995 when Amazon started. And that is, how do you tell a software system how to accurately sell your products? And while that's an easy thing to say, it's kind of a hard thing to do in practice. There's thousands. There are many fields, and the new item setup feels like thousands, and they're kind of confusing. And after you set them up, then you have to make sure that they stay set up correctly in a system that doesn't really understand you or your products. And once you've done all of that, then you have an excellent foundation to grow your business using marketing tools, all kinds of strategies that can exponentially impact your business. But it all starts with the fundamentals, and the fundamentals are primarily content. So today we're going to cover some of the most common Amazon content issues that we tend to see across brands, why these problems happen, and how to spot them early, scalable strategies for auditing and fixing broken or missing content, and then how to maintain those high performing listings over time. And along the way, we'll learn a lot about why it's so important and what the benefit is of focusing on these areas. I definitely much prefer conversational presentations than dragging folks through the slide deck. So please, as you have thoughts or questions or disagreements that you want to debate as we're going along, just drop them in the chat, and we'd love to turn it into a conversation. So let's start at the beginning. The problem: broken content. Broken content happens constantly, and it's really painful for brands. It's like the silent killer of your Amazon catalog. Most brands that I talk to, they spend a lot of time thinking about content. They have brand teams that develop messaging that will resonate with customers. They have an agency that creates this content. They spend a lot of time building and deploying this specific content to achieve certain objectives across search terms and search terms rankings, and it's really well done and thought out. But then immediately upon deployment, they sort of say, great, our content is deployed. We should be good to go. And that's, a real fallacy that we see. Most of the time, brands' content is wrong. The average brand, when we look at their content, say, what should your content be? What are the titles and bullets descriptions that you expect to see on Amazon across your product catalog? And we compare that to what's actually displaying to a customer, which can be different than what you see in the UI of Vendor Central or Seller Central. But if you compare your intention against your customer experience, we'll find that it's correct about 40% of the time, which is pretty tremendously low. And if we look at variations, and we'll talk a little bit more about variations here in a minute, it's even worse. Variation intention or correctness there is usually about 25% across what brands expected to deploy for clients, which these are pretty low numbers. And we'll talk about the things that are driving them and how to fix those things. But they're really important. And they're important because content on the page is what drives conversion. And these conversations are always kind of a little bit challenging. You have some folks that are experts, you're like, hey, Justin, this is like pretty rudimentary. I know this, let's move it along. And other folks that are like, what is a variation? So I'm going to try to split the middle ground and then use any feedback to redirect the conversation as we go along. But for those who aren't intimately familiar with variations is taking multiple products and putting them on the same detail page to enable customers to choose the right product for them. And I'll show you an example here in a minute of one that's maybe not so great. These are very important because you spend all this time and money to develop traffic, and then that traffic, through search results or maybe offline activity comes to your detail page. And then that customer either buys or they don't buy. That metric is called conversion. What percentage of customers are converted into orders? If your conversion rate is 0, your sales are 0. If your conversion rate is 100%, that means everybody hits your page, buys it. And so reality for brands ends up somewhere between 0 and 100%. And small changes in your conversion rate have huge impacts on your total sales. A 1% change of conversion rate on a detail page, moving customers from converting 8% to 9% of the time, can result in 10% or more percent change in your overall sales on Amazon. So while we kind of fine tune lots of different media strategies, most folks ignore the big driver of your business or the big lever that you can pull to increase sales, which is increase my conversion. And that all starts with content. And once you've developed it, you have to deploy it, and it needs to be correct on Amazon. So I kind of went into depth. I'm going to pause there for a second. I'm just going to check to answer a question here. So is this data based on all product listings or those under control of brand registered seller ASINs? That's a great question. So the question here is this an experience that most brand have that I'm talking about here, or what kind of specific stuff? We are seeing this across all brands. So this is an average number. My company does a split between Vendor Central and Seller Central. So it's pretty representative of brands across the spectrum. So I would say unless, smaller catalogs tend to be more accurate, it's a little easier to watch them. Big categories tend to be big catalogs tend to be less accurate because you might have 100,000 t-shirts that you're watching. But I would recommend anybody that has more than, call it, 15 or 20 ASINs, if you audited how accurate your content is on Amazon, you're probably going to be pretty surprised. So let's look at an example of how detail page conversion rate can be so impactful to your business, and what goes wrong when you don't maintain your content and your variations. So this is an example of a simple search. I searched M&Ms on Amazon, and if you search M&Ms on Amazon, chances are this result in the bottom left-hand corner here that shows these 2 bottles of M&Ms is going to be your top result. Now, M&Ms is a big search, lots of traffic compared to other keywords, and that is the number 1 placement. So this is the face out that is going to be driving a lion's share of their business. And if you click into that product, what you'll find is this is their detail page. And so this is the main hero SKU we're seeing on the left here, 2 bottles of M&Ms. Kind of weird configuration, but who knows? Amazon sells weird configurations of products at times just because of the way that's how it is. And so, okay, that's fine. Maybe that is the best-selling product. A small aside, when we launched the grocery category at Amazon, our number 1 SKU was a 5-pound bag of gummy bears. And it's pretty hard to eat 5 pounds of gummy bears, but because the algorithm really liked that product, it became the top SKU. So when you're looking at your product catalog, you need to remember, don't think about your product catalog in terms of what you think your top sellers are. Look back to say, what is Amazon actually driving? Because that whole combination of shipping economics, consumer behavior, and availability offline is going to mean your top sellers on Amazon are vastly different than what your top sellers would be in a brick and mortar setting. So looking at this product, great product, M&Ms, here we go. And then our choices are, we have 2 choices of milk chocolate and 1 of peanut. None of these are the choices that I would expect as a consumer. If I typed M&Ms, I'm going to be expecting to see, the bag of M&Ms, maybe some caramel M&Ms, some peanuts, not these particular configurations. These feel pretty weird. My guess is the conversion rate of this detail page is probably 2 or 3%. It's a pretty low conversion rate because they're bringing customers into it. It has a great ranking, but then they're not giving the customers the right products to choose from. And so the customers are going to bounce off this page and do another search. And they're going to keep doing searches until maybe they find an M&M product they want, or if they get frustrated enough, choose a competitive product.
I was going to just ask a quick question, Justin. Do you look at this and go, it's a mistake in the content rendering, but the intention of what variation should be there is right, is just not matching that? Or do you think that the variation setup itself is off? Like when you look at this, what do you see as the core issue?
What caused this one? That's a great question. Let's come back to the cause in just a second. I'll finish off on on the impact, and then let's talk about why it happened and then what you do.
Yeah.
So if we look at this one, top selling SKU, top search result, this category on average converts at about 16% of the time, 16% of the customers. And so their top SKU here is getting, somewhere around 20% of the sales it should be if it had a correct variation strategy. Your question's excellent. Why is this wrong? I've been around long enough to know how M&M's set up the products on Amazon and their intention for variations. And they had a great variation strategy at one point in time that was around usage. And if you come in for a given product, here's when you might want to go across flavors. If you come in with a different kind of product, here's how you might want to go across sizes. And they were very thoughtful about the way that you should have the right number of choices on the screen to do it. This is not how it was designed at all. So this variations are a dynamic place on Amazon. Amazon is constantly running a process that used to be called Twister, where they're saying, I think I know how to variate those products, and they will break your variations and revariate them together in a way that Amazon's system thinks is going to maximize sales. Third parties will come along and they will attach to your products and add their product to your variation, which might make sense or it might not make sense. If you haven't done an excellent job with brand registry, or brand registry was just really confusing, or brand registry was just acting weird, you may have lost authority at some point along the way, and another seller could have come in and set up their own variations and broken your whole strategy. This is why we tend to see variation correctness at about 25%, is it's just such a dynamic, changing environment on Amazon. And the only real way to deal with it is one, have authority to this detail page. Make sure that you are the brand or you have the highest possible authority to render it. Check it all the time and then resubmit your variations to Amazon as you see they're incorrect.
Basically, Amazon is dynamically changing stuff. It doesn't matter what I said as my source of truth. This is changing. And so tracking it, and then if there is some suboptimal combos, you'll have to raise tickets and do something about this.
Yeah, totally. I would consider like when you tell Amazon, you never get to decide. You used to get to be a voice in the crowd, influencing what Amazon is doing to your detail pages, even as the brand. Okay, there's another great question. Does the data include resellers or just brand-owned sellers? My data is really just including brand-owned sellers. We don't tend to do a lot of business with resellers, not because I don't like them. I think they're great. They just haven't. We just don't have that business in our segment. So my data is really just typically brands for the most part. So why this happens? Multiple contributors to the Amazon detail page. That detail page is a shared space, even though it's your product as a brand. Everybody gets a say in what goes on to that page. Data sync conflicts exist between internal third-party systems and Amazon. Some folks are syndicating content, which is a great way to manage your content. Syndication only works somewhere between 50 and 80% of the time, depending on your listings and how you've managed content in the past. Manual contributions can be overridden by vendors and other folks inside Amazon, either to a positive effect when you're the brand and asking them to do that, or maybe to a negative effect if there's an error, which happens more than we'd all like to think, or someone else that had authority over that product at some point also can make changes to it. And the other reason what happens is it's just really hard to track all of that all the time. We've talked to a lot of brands that hire folks. They just click at every page and they have a whole massive team of people looking every day to make sure your products are correct. Not a very scalable way to do it, but because it's constantly changing, it's hard to manage, to monitor and see what's going on. So a little bit around the business impact. I think we hit it pretty hard, but just kind of a few more points around this. Bad product content reduces your facings or your placement within your targeted search terms. It lowers your conversion rate. It decreases your effectiveness of your ad spend because your products aren't either showing up or your conversion rate is lower, increasing your cost per click to gain traffic. And maybe most importantly, for the long-term impact of your product is if you're showing the wrong images, you have the wrong bullets, you're making the wrong claim, you're going to get negative reviews because customers say that isn't what I bought. And those negative reviews follow you really forever. So the downstream impact of bad content can be pretty powerful. And just a little bit we did a poll recently to say, hey, brands, what percentage of your content is correct? If you're syndicating it to Amazon using a service. And you can see, most folks are saying that either they don't know or the vast majority of folks are saying, it's wrong. It's right less than 75% of the time.
Jason,
Impactful.
before you
Yep.
move to the next one, so there's a comment from Ian. He's saying they use a variation lock through Vendor Central. He's unsure. They're unsure if it's a AVS exclusive thing or in beta, but it looks like that is really helping them. Can you comment on that for the benefit of the rest of the audience? Is there such a thing as a variation lock?
I think there's been a lot of programs over the years that Amazon has rolled out to give brands more control over their detail page content, being titles, bullets, descriptions, variations. We saw some products can't have third parties on them. That reduces content errors. Some products are in exclusive categories. There's all kinds of tools that Amazon has rolled out. And I think all of them, including variation lock, this is not a program that I've seen rolled out in a major way, not going to be available for most products. And I don't know what the future of that program will be, I guess, which is to say that we've never seen a program that Amazon has rolled out that's provided a scalable solution over time to this problem. I think a lot of times it mitigates the problem, and that's great. And if you can get an AVS to agree to set it up, I think you should, depending on what the co-op ask is for that particular program. Usually they come with a pretty substantial ask against that program. You should, and hopefully your next AVS you can maintain it, and over time it's something that'll be sustainable. And if that keeps it down, then it lowers your maintenance cost. But everybody should still look at their products and say, am I compliant? If they set up that lock, is my lock actually working? because most of the time there's a lot of variance in those programs. Scalable solution. So what should you do about the solution? The cost of auditing this content on a regular basis is come down so far. There's so many third-party tools that will do this. Rainforest API will provide the data. Jungle Scout will do stuff. Intentwise has lots of great data. Like, find the right data provider and maintain your version of what is true. And you can get access to information that'll tell you, does the stuff on Amazon match the stuff that I have in my catalog? I would say in this process, the hardest part is not getting the data around what is live on Amazon. The hard process is internal and saying, what should my content on Amazon be? Do I actually have a spreadsheet that lists out how my variations should be variated on Amazon? Because if you do, you can work with Intentwise and you can find some data and have a regular audit against that information and know what's right and what's wrong. This is a free tool. Like, it is the hardest part about it is organizing your internal information.
There's obviously text information, right? Titles, bullets, whatnot. What does one do with images and compliance of images? But that's a harder technical problem. Are there good solves for that, for automatic image mismatch detection?
Images are harder for
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
Images are much harder. We do it now at Workflow Labs. We'd be happy to help folks talk about auditing images. I have not personally, I've not seen many other third-party solutions out there that are doing an image audit at scale. I mean, I believe that in the next 6 to 12 months, this will probably be. Are you guys doing it yet?
No, 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 no. Just it's a harder problem, and I was just curious. I mean, there's questions about who the third party tools are, so I was just curious if someone has solved this.
Yeah, we do it internally, and this is harder because it's not a absolute. A title, you can say it's right or it's wrong. With an image, you say it's 90% right or wrong because you kind of have to do a pixel by pixel comparison. So we're early in this stage. We're doing it for quite a few brands now. I would expect in the next 6 to 12 months, content auditing of images to become something that's pretty pervasive and low cost. But I've not yet worked with a brand where images are the number one concern.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's phase 2 after you fix your written content and your variations. Move on to audits. And you don't have to do this every day. Some folks are like, can we audit our products every hour? Whatever. It's not important to audit them that often. It takes Amazon 2 to 3 days to update your product once you fix an error. And you certainly don't want to submit the same error to Amazon multiple times. If you're already working on the problem and you submit it again, you've caused a real downstream problem for yourself. And in many cases, kind of starting to make Amazon upset with the way you're pushing through content updates. And so a process that audits your products, your written content and variations every 2 to 7 days, sort of a great best practice, not too hard to set up or manage, and will have a tremendous impact on your total sales and content accuracy. There you go. And I see in chat, there's some other great examples of third-party tools. I think getting the data from Amazon has become so cheap and easy around what's on Amazon. That's not the problem. The problem nowadays is getting your information correct and having an internal process where you're auditing or using a third-party service, like we do this. Other folks do it too. A third-party service that audits and says, does your stuff look like what it's supposed to look according to you? And doing it every week. And the next step here is you have to take control of your listings. This chart here is our experience with a brand, and they were a great brand, a big brand on Amazon. They had brand registry. They had great selling products. When we started with them, we said, well, they had a large product catalog. We're talking about 3,000 SKUs. We said, what percentage of your title is correct and what percentage of your bullets are correct? And they were very shocked to find out, this is a less than 10% correctness on Amazon. And this is a result of many different things. They launched them. Amazon recommends new titles for your products. They have ways they think titles will work more effectively. We're definitely seeing an increase of this with, Rufus and AI tools saying you better rewrite your title and post it on Amazon on your behalf. All of those create titles that you didn't design as a brand. So with them, you can see it took a while. It took 8 weeks to get that content from a 10% to over a 90% correctness on Amazon. And the reason for that is some content you can just give to Amazon. You submit it and it goes live. A lot of content has problems. Maybe you're missing attributes of the product. Maybe you're making a claim that Amazon isn't going to allow into a bullet. And so you have to grind all of those issues until you have content that can be deployed to Amazon. And then once you get it to a plus 90% correctness, it's pretty easy to maintain and easy to change over time. So, kind of a one audit, set it and forget it isn't going to fix the problem. You have to fix the problem, grind through the details, and then keep it above that 90%. So that's it. So this is content. I guarantee if you take a look at your content on Amazon, you'll probably be a little bit surprised. But if you invest a small amount of time and energy into the problem, the impact on your marketing campaigns, search placements, organic traffic conversion is pretty substantial. This is the fundamental of engaging with customers on Amazon and growing your business.
One request I have for you is just like, I mean, there is content detection, there is raising requests and making sure Amazon fixes it. It'll be helpful just for the audience to know what does Workflow Labs do in that whole sequence, and then we can kind of get into the rest of the questions here.
Sure, absolutely. Again, I don't want to make it a pitch for the company. I think everyone can set up systems to do it. But if folks would like help, the things that we do is we basically are your full kind of Amazon operations utility belt. We've built a large amount of software that says what tasks on Amazon can be automatically completed. And so our system audits content, finds errors, submits changes through the UI and whatever system's necessary on Amazon to resolve those errors. So every day you wake up and say, wow, all my stuff is correct. And look at all of this work product that's been done without even me knowing to fix content variations, item suppressions, product content, all of those sort of maintenance issues the system does on its own. Additionally, anything else that folks want to do with Amazon, like new item setup, chargebacks, any of the nuts and bolts of managing your Amazon business. That's what we do for brands and agencies.
So there's a question from Talia. Can you just cover this?
That sounds great. So the question is, we're going to go over how we can fix the broken content. My content team has gone round and round with Seller Central, Vendor Central, Brand Registry, and they keep sending us in circles. We keep being informed that another seller's contributions are winning the PDP. I wish I had one answer to this question. We sort of build significantly sized decision trees to figure out how we're going to fix every individual piece of content. Sometimes the reason that the content is going live, and Amazon doesn't always tell you the real reason why your content isn't going live. But sometimes the reason why your content isn't going live is that there is another provider of the product that has greater authority than you. And sometimes they have brand registry. Sometimes the user that created the original brand registry is not still with the company. So there is a real problem sometimes in that you have to be the actual user who set up brand registry in order to get that content deployed live to that product. Most of the time, we find that content isn't going live because there's additional attributes that are missing on the product, the red boxes. So going into the UI, this is a Vendor Central specific thing, finding the missing attributes, filling out those additional attributes that are now required for the product, but weren't when they originally were set up, will allow the content to flow through and go live. After we go through kind of the main causes, which are do you have authority? Are you the brand registry owner? Are we submitting the content through the brand registry owner's account on Amazon, as opposed to another account in that, another user in that account that is not the brand registered account? Once we've gone through those basics, then we really do have a process with Amazon where we're cutting tickets to Amazon, asking them to investigate this issue, finding the root cause of that issue, and asking them in some cases to override the problem. In other cases, helping us work the way through it, which I know is probably not the answer you wanted, but we found that's just how you have to do business with Amazon. You follow the normal processes through. When you reach the dead end, then you have a engaged ticketing process with Amazon where we're uncovering the root issue and resolving that root issue. The nice thing about, and we've been doing that for a lot of time, other catalog teams have similar experience. So if you have someone who's been doing it for a long time, they probably can help troubleshoot that. The nice thing about those is once you resolve those root issues, they're gone for a long time. So once you've solved that sort of either content, flame, or ownership issue, it's solved. And next time your content will go through.
I'm going to read this one out. Do you push on a regular basis and that'll ensure that the content is in a good place? Is that a strategy?
I mean, it's better than not pushing. But no, I wouldn't say it's a good strategy. Syndicating to Amazon, if your syndication success rate is 60%, it will always be 60% until you fix the reason why the other 40% isn't syndicating. And so, at some point, you're hitting the button 1,000 times isn't going to make the problem is going to make the problem any better. But it is definitely better to have a product information management source that is pushing that information to Amazon than to have nothing. So step one, set up your product information. Step two, have a process that sends it to Amazon. Step three, audit how well your syndication process is doing. And step four, resolve the remaining issues that your syndication is not pushing successfully through to Amazon. I would say, most brands do pretty good at getting number one and number two set up. Pretty rare do we see that there is like this process for understanding the error size, resolving those error size. Because syndication can only push through when there are no red boxes, there's no authority issues, and there's no problems with claims. And that represents, somewhere between 20 and 40% of content deployment on Amazon.
Question from Edwin Sanchez. Do we have to update the content for all the vendor codes for a single item?
That's a great question. Your real question is, I'm wondering if the real question is, do we have to or should we? So I would say, I've been in the business for a long time. When we did this with people, we did not update all the vendor codes because sometimes you're talking about a lot of product updates multiplied by all the vendor codes. And so we would just, when I ran a service-based, people-based industry in the past, or company in the past, we would just update the active vendor, the one that Amazon's actively buying it from, because that should be the authority that is driving the content on Amazon. I can tell you that's not the best practice. The best practice is to update because Amazon's publishing system can become confused. The system that pushes the information to Amazon does have access to all those different vendor codes, and you will find at times it pulls content from the wrong vendor code. It's not the majority of the time. So if you're updating your active vendor code, it will work most of the time. And then every once in a while, it won't work. And you won't really know why. And it'll take a lot of kind of uncovering and digging to figure out that it was an alternate vendor code caused the problem. So when we update, we always update all. That way you just don't have the problem of multiple versions of content sitting in Amazon somewhere waiting to be shown to the website when you least expect it.
There's a couple of questions about your services, Justin. Someone here with having trouble with brand registry setup, linking of the catalog, so on and so forth. Do you guys help with the troubleshooting of all of that? Is one question.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say we would love to help anyone with any of that. And if it's a service that we can provide ongoing, great. If it's just like sharing some ideas and helping some folks out along the way, we'd love to, we'd love to be a resource that you can just talk to. And if we have a relevant service for you, obviously we'd love to sell it. The only things we really don't do is we don't do, marketing pay per click. We don't get into any of the marketing space. We don't do creative development or, kind of custom strategy. Those are all opinions and strategic development. And we like to be in the nuts and bolts of, if it's something you can do on Amazon as a task, that's in our wheelhouse. The other thing you don't really get into very much is unsuppressing seller essential accounts. Those are tend to be out of our control.
Another question from Erin. Any advice on handling ASINs with vendor or retail contributions?
A challenge will be that Vendor Central does have authority rights over Seller Central the vast majority of the time, unless the brand itself has become registered and given authority to the seller. So in this case, if it's a seller account trying to override Vendor Central content, is going to require brand registry in order to overcome the Vendor Central content. So a typical situation like this is we work with the client and say, all right, who owns the product? Who owns the brand? How can we get into that? How can we be updating the content through that brand registry account? And if we are updating it through the brand registry account and it's still not overriding the Vendor Central content, then we would drive that through a ticket with Amazon. And they can fix that. They will say they can't. I saw another question in here is they say they can't fix or can't override it. They certainly can. A lot of times it's using the right words and using the right consistency around maintaining the case and driving it to completion.
By the way, one of the things we have done here at Intentwise is we have launched a community for everyone that's in the e-commerce space to join and ask questions and get answers from experts like Justin, not just in one session, but on an ongoing basis. We cover all kinds of topics, including content stuff. So there are a couple more questions here, Justin. I have one burning question that I've been meaning to ask you. AI is having implications both on what Amazon is doing with content and what brands are doing with content generation. What are you seeing as the net effect of all that?
Yeah, I guess This is one of those questions that, man, I don't know, like next week it'll probably be different than what I think today is happening so fast, which is always one of the things that's impressed me about Intentwise, you guys' ability to keep up the speed of technology. And so you guys are always at the forefront. So I kind of want to ask you, but I would say from my perspective, Amazon's use of AI is going to be in lots of different places. Obviously, they're going to use it in search, and your content strategy and how you generate content is going to have to be a lot faster and more thoughtful around how do I generate content that's going to talk to a language-based model as opposed to a keyword search-based model? And so creating that content, deploying that content, maintaining that content only becomes more and more important because the search engine is so much more dynamic. The other thing that's happening is Amazon is creating your content for you as a brand and deploying that to your customers using AI, which I think is a real dangerous thing to do. We're talking about in some cases claims that have medical implications, or there's a reason why brands choose their titles and legal teams review said titles. And Amazon can't just write AI and write over that, but they do, and they've to date, in many cases, kind of had opt-in processes to it. But this is the brand's responsibility. If someone sues someone over a claim, they're not going to sue Amazon; they're going to sue the brand,
Yeah.
or becomes the brand problem. So I would say, in general, it just increases the need for brands to be checking their titles and forcing Amazon to revert from these AI generated titles to a brand approved title when they're finding content that's incorrect. Whether it's from third party submission or AI, doesn't matter. This is just more noise on the detail page.
It's funny. I see a question about your M&M example, and this is the same thing that occurred to my mind. Like, okay, what was wrong with that, right? And I think your message on the M&M page was that you've got a combination of variations that potentially Amazon chose to put together. May not be the most optimal combinations to drive the highest conversion rates. And your point basically is track what Amazon is doing with variations, and if there's a better mix of variations that is suited for your brand, and frankly, like as a brand, you would know that most likely better than Amazon, where an algorithm is coming up with this. Put in the request to have the right set of variations. I think that's what I've understood that to be. Am I accurate in that? Like, just want to clarify. There's a couple of questions I can go like, what's wrong with that M&M's BDB?
No, yeah, that's a great question. I'm really glad folks asks. Variations is something that I'm kind of passionate about. I think they're one of the most powerful tools on Amazon and vastly underutilized, by brands and sellers. So if you look at this page, just put yourself in the mindset of a customer. You came to Amazon, you're going to buy some M&Ms, and apparently you don't know what flavor of M&Ms you wanted or what size of M&Ms because you just typed M&Ms, and this is what you got. And these are your only choices. And you came to this page like, as a customer, is this going to drive you to purchase? My guess is, it's probably not going to drive me to purchase. Like if I'm getting for my kids' lunches, this is not like a lunch thing. If I'm buying them for a fundraiser or anything else, this is not the product package size and configuration that I expect in my brain when I'm shopping for M&Ms. I'm sure these are great products or whatever, but its conversion rate, because it's not matching the customer's expectation, is going to be low, and they're going to go back to search. And so that's the problem with this page is it doesn't show the selection. If it had every flavor of M&Ms on here, and I didn't have to go to another page and potentially be put in front of a competitive product, you're more likely to get the sale from me than if you make me go back and do a whole bunch of searches trying to find the product I want. Another example of how variations are so powerful and why brands should care about them and drive them is once you have a powerful product on Amazon, it's got a great top selling ranking. It's got all of this data where Amazon says, Justin bought this product and he shops like Srinath. And so Srinath should buy this product. It's put all of this rich data around this hero SKU. Brands often want to say, well, I need to launch a new SKU on Amazon. This common thing, obviously. And so when you launch a new SKU, Amazon says, I don't know anything about that SKU. No one has ever bought it. Maybe no one wants it. And so I'm not going to market it at all. I'm not going to market it anymore. I'm not going to put it in search results. I'm going to do nothing. So a great way to launch a new product is to variate it with an existing product. I take my new flavor of M&Ms and I attach it to my high velocity SKU here. And by doing that, I can drive sales to my new product launch, let that generate sales. And then maybe you want to split it off and let it be its own variation because it doesn't make sense in the same shopper journey as my hero SKU, but you're using that variation as a hook to start building an Amazon business. That's an awesome way to drive a business. And if you are a seasonal apparel company or like launching new SKUs or flavors or colors, that's a way to get it going. But if you don't have a great way for deploying your variations, monitoring your variations, and making sure they're accurate and working the way you designed, this is maybe one of the most powerful tools on Amazon that's completely unavailable to you. So I guess that's the big message I was trying to drive with the M&M one. And I know this is not what they designed.
Well, this will be the last question, but how impactful do you think A plus content is?
Yeah, I like the A plus content question. So again, is it as important as the title? No. Is it as important as the bullets? No. Is it important description? Maybe. And then you're down to A plus content. And now the question becomes a little bit more nuanced. And this is about the brand and knowing your customers. If you're selling deodorant, my guess is A plus content is not really going to help change the conversion rate of a customer. Like they know the deodorant they purchase and what the deodorant they don't purchase. If you're selling, outdoor patio furniture, having A plus content that helps folks envision that patio furniture in their house with a lot of rich information around dimensions and stuff, it probably does have a significant impact on conversion. And there aren't a lot of other great places on the Amazon detail page to really tell that story. So I would say A plus content really depends by brand. Its number one focus is conversion. So if it's not going to change conversion, don't spend much time on it. If it is going to change conversion because of that shopper behavior, then do it right. But please don't do it the same across your whole brand. We see that so much. Like this A plus content isn't about the product, it's about the manufacturer. That isn't going to do anything for the conversion rate on that. The other impact of A plus content is its influence on search. And I would say it's not as important again as titles and descriptions. It does drive offline search, and offline search like Google and such, somewhere around 10% of your total traffic on Amazon. So anything you can do to increase your content on your detail page is going to increase your relevance in offline search. So it's an important and a great tactic. And for some brands, A plus is critical. For others, I would say, it's an afterthought.
Justin, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sheena. Thanks, everyone.